Isabella was only 18 when her life was quietly taken away from her. She lived in a small village where the houses stood close together and everyone knew everyone else. Mornings smelled of soil and grass, and evenings were filled with voices, laughter, and the sound of her two younger brothers running through the yard. Her family was poor, but their home was warm. Her father worked in the fields from sunrise to sunset. Her mother kept the house together with tired hands and a gentle heart. Isabella helped where she could, but more than anything, she loved books. Books were her escape. They carried her far beyond the narrow village roads, into classrooms, cities, and futures she could only imagine. Isabella dreamed of becoming a teacher. She wanted to stand in front of a blackboard one day and give children the same gift books had given her, hope. Her parents knew this dream. They were proud of her. They believed she could build a better life, not just for herself, but for all of them. Then one evening, everything changed. Her parents called her into the small living room. The lamp flickered softly, but the air felt heavy. Her mother held Isabella's hand tightly. Her father stared at the floor, silent. When her mother finally spoke, her voice trembled. A man wanted to marry Isabella. He was from the city. He was older. He was wealthy. He could help the family survive. Isabella felt the words crash into her like cold water. She said no immediately. She was too young. She wanted to study. She wanted her life. But her father finally looked up, his eyes full of shame and fear. The crops had failed. There was no money left. Her brother's future was uncertain. This marriage, he said, was the only way. Isabella understood the truth before she accepted it. This was not about love. It was about survival. That night, she cried alone, holding her books like they could protect her. In the morning, she looked at her brothers' faces and knew she could not refuse again. With a broken voice and a heavy heart, Isabella agreed. The wedding came quickly. Too quickly. She wore a white dress her mother had sewn with shaking hands. People smiled. They said she was lucky. She did not feel lucky. She felt empty. When Daniel arrived, tall and serious, she barely recognized him as her husband. He did not smile. He did not speak much. He felt like a stranger standing too close. After the ceremony, Isabella hugged her family goodbye. Her mother cried. Her brothers clung to her dress. Then she stepped into a black car she had never seen before. As it drove away, Isabella watched her village disappear through the window. Her home grew smaller and smaller until it vanished. In that moment, Isabella believed her life was over. The city did not welcome Isabella the way she had imagined. It rose around her like a wall of stone and glass, loud and endless, nothing like the open fields and quiet mornings of her village. Daniel's house stood behind tall iron gates, so large that it felt unreal. It was beautiful in the way museums are beautiful, polished, expensive, and cold. From the first night, Isabella understood one painful truth: this was not a home. It was a place where she was meant to exist quietly. Daniel left the house before sunrise every morning. Sometimes she heard his footsteps on the marble floor, distant and rushed, but she never saw his face. By the time she came downstairs, the house was already silent again. At night, he returned late. She would hear the front door close softly, the sound of keys, the echo of steps moving away. He never knocked on her door. They lived under the same roof, yet their lives never touched. Meals were the hardest. Isabella sat alone at a long dining table meant for many people. Plates were placed carefully in front of her, prepared by Martha, the housekeeper. Martha was polite and efficient, but her words were few. "Good morning, madam." "Dinner is ready, madam." Nothing more. Isabella ate in silence, surrounded by empty chairs. The food was rich and well cooked, but she could not taste it. She missed the simple meals of her village, eaten with laughter, shared from the same pot. Her room was larger than her parents' entire house, yet it felt smaller somehow. At night, she lay awake in the wide bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant sounds of the city. She wondered if Daniel regretted marrying her. Perhaps she was an obligation, a duty fulfilled and then forgotten. She began to question her own worth. Was she only valuable because her marriage had saved her family? Days passed slowly. Isabella walked through the house like a shadow, touching expensive furniture she did not feel allowed to use. She was dressed well, fed well, protected from hardship, yet she had never felt so invisible. She thought of herself as a bird locked inside a golden cage, safe, admired from the outside, but unable to fly. One afternoon, while wandering through the endless corridors to escape her thoughts, Isabella opened a door she had never noticed before. Inside was a vast library. Shelves reached the ceiling, filled with books of every kind: novels, poetry, textbooks, children's stories. The smell of old paper filled the air. Isabella stood frozen, her heart beating faster. For the first time since leaving her village, she felt something warm rise inside her chest. She stepped forward and touched a book gently, as if afraid it might disappear. In that silent room, surrounded by stories and knowledge, a small light appeared in her darkness. Maybe, just maybe, this place held more than loneliness. For the first 2 weeks in the city, Isabella barely saw her husband. She heard him more than she saw him: his footsteps on marble floors late at night, the soft click of the front door before dawn. Daniel was a presence without a voice, a shadow moving through the same house but never into her life. She told herself this distance was proof that her fear had been right. He had not wanted a wife. He had wanted an arrangement. One evening, Isabella wandered into a room she had avoided before, the library. It was vast, with tall shelves stretching toward the ceiling, filled with books of every kind. Novels, history, poetry, philosophy. She ran her fingers along the spines as if touching old friends. For the first time since leaving her village, her chest loosened. Books had always been her refuge. Here, surrounded by them, she felt less alone. She was standing there with a book in her hands when Daniel walked in unexpectedly. He stopped when he saw her, clearly surprised. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Isabella's heart began to race, but Daniel's voice came out calm, almost hesitant. "Do you like reading?" he asked. She nodded. "Very much." He looked at the book she was holding, then at her, as if noticing her properly for the first time. He walked to another shelf, pulled out a thin volume, and handed it to her. "This one is special," he said. "Poems." It was a small gesture, but it changed something. He had not ordered her. He had not ignored her. He had seen her. After that night, small, quiet changes followed. Isabella began spending time in the neglected garden behind the house. The flowers were dying, the soil dry and forgotten. She rolled up her sleeves and began to work, pulling weeds, watering the earth, planting new seeds. The physical labor grounded her. Watching life slowly return to the garden gave her a sense of purpose she thought she had lost forever. One evening, Daniel found her there at sunset. He watched silently for a while before speaking. "My mother loved this garden," he said softly. "After she died, I couldn't bear to look at it." It was the first time he spoke of his pain. Isabella listened, not interrupting. She realized then that his silence was not cruelty, it was grief. That night, a storm swept through the city. Thunder shook the house, and Isabella's old fears returned. When Daniel knocked on her door with a candle in his hand and stayed beside her until the storm passed, something fragile but real formed between them. For the first time, Isabella felt safe, not trapped, not sold but seen. And in that quiet moment, she understood. The man behind the cold face was just as lonely as she was. At first, their dinners were quiet. Isabella would sit at one end of the long table, Daniel at the other. Plates clinked softly. The sound of cutlery echoed in the large dining room. But little by little, the silence began to change. It was no longer heavy. It became gentle, almost comfortable. Daniel started asking simple questions. How was her day? What book was she reading now? Isabella answered carefully at first, still afraid of saying too much. But each time, Daniel listened. He did not interrupt. He did not judge. One evening, Isabella spoke about her dream. She told him how, since childhood, she had wanted to become a teacher. How she loved books, loved explaining things, loved watching children understand something for the first time. Her voice trembled as she spoke, as if afraid the dream might disappear the moment she said it out loud. Daniel did not laugh. He did not tell her it was impossible. He only nodded and said quietly, "That is a good dream." The next day, a large box appeared in the library. Inside were books, textbooks, children's stories, teaching guides. Isabella stared at them in disbelief. Daniel stood behind her and said, almost awkwardly, "You can study here. If you still want to." That night, Isabella cried, but not from sadness. For the first time since leaving her village, someone had protected her dream instead of taking it away. From that moment, the house began to change. Isabella spent her mornings studying and her afternoons in the garden. The once-forgotten flowers slowly returned to life under her care. Color spread through the yard, just as warmth spread through the house. Daniel started coming home earlier. Sometimes he helped her water the plants. Sometimes he sat nearby, reading, simply keeping her company. They laughed more. Isabella discovered that Daniel had a quiet sense of humor. His rare smiles felt precious. The house was no longer a cold mansion. It became a home filled with small routines, shared meals, soft music in the evenings, conversations that lasted longer each night. One evening, they sat together by the fireplace. The firelight danced across Daniel's face. Isabella watched him without fear for the first time. She realized something gently, without shock or drama. She was not living out a sacrifice anymore. She was choosing this life. She was choosing him. Without thinking, Isabella moved closer and rested her head on Daniel's shoulder. He froze for a brief second, then slowly wrapped his arm around her. Neither of them spoke. They did not need to. In that quiet moment, Isabella understood the truth. Love had grown between them, not loudly, not suddenly, but patiently, honestly, and real. Isabella often thought back to the night she left her village, sitting in silence inside a black car, believing her life had ended before it truly began. If she could speak to that frightened girl now, she would tell her something simple but powerful: you were wrong. Life did not end. It changed, slowly, quietly, and in ways she never expected. Months had passed since her arrival in the city. The mansion no longer felt like a cold museum. It felt lived in. The garden bloomed with color. The dining table carried warmth instead of silence. And the man she once feared had become someone she trusted deeply. Daniel never raised his voice. He never demanded gratitude. He never reminded her of sacrifice. Instead, he gave her space to read, to study, to dream again. Isabella began to understand an important truth: Daniel did not rescue her. He did something far more meaningful. He respected her. He listened. He believed in her dreams even when she herself had almost buried them. When she studied late into the night, preparing lessons she hoped to teach one day, he would quietly place a cup of tea beside her. When she doubted herself, he never argued. He simply waited until she found her strength again. Over time, Isabella realized that love did not always arrive with passion or grand promises. Sometimes, love was steady footsteps in the hallway. Sometimes, it was shared silence by the fireplace. Sometimes, it was patience. What grew between them was not forced. It was chosen, day after day, without pressure or fear. One evening, as Isabella stood in the garden she had brought back to life, she understood how much she had changed. She was no longer a girl who believed her worth was decided by others. She was a woman who knew she deserved respect, kindness, and the freedom to grow. Her marriage had not erased her identity. It had given her the safety to rediscover it. She rested her head against Daniel's shoulder, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. In that quiet moment, she felt something stronger than happiness. She felt peace. Isabella learned that not every arranged beginning ends in sorrow. Not every quiet man hides cruelty. And not every dream dies when circumstances change. Some dreams simply take a longer path. Sometimes, love does not arrive loudly. It does not demand attention. It grows quietly, when two lonely hearts choose patience instead of fear, understanding instead of resistance. And if this story touched your heart and helped you practice English through real emotions, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us for more Level 3 English stories that speak softly, but stay with you long after they end.